Approaching Fangs, Kheios is the cross epic unit for Dark States and has been somewhat of a meme for a good while now. Kheios has finally received a good amount of support in Set 8 as well as the promos that he had received before that. In general, just about any Dark States card released is support for Kheios given his mechanic, but he's actually in a pretty decent playable spot. He does have one glaring weakness that hasn't entirely been addressed yet, but it is trending upwards for the little edge boy. So, Kheios has two skills. First one says act on Vanguard Circle once per turn. You can counterblast one, discard a card from your hand, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 card among them and put it into your hand. Choose up to 1 unit card from among them, call it to Vanguard Circle, and put the rest into your soul. Then he has another skill, the main skill here, which says when this unit attacks a Vanguard, if your soul has 8 or more cards with different card name, choose up to 1 of your rear guards, or not so much up to 1, you have to choose 1, and it gets 10k to the end of the turn. Then if you have 13, you can choose all of your rear guards instead. So that's basically the main crux for Kheios, is having up to 8, particularly more importantly 13, different cards in your soul with different card names. And originally the problem with Kheios is that it wasn't very easy to get up to 13 cards with different names into your soul. That's become so much easier now. However, there was another glaring problem with Kheios, is that Kheios is extremely rearguard dependent. Kheios by himself cannot do anything. It's kind of funny that his skill actually gives power to all rear guards, not him. He actually does not get any power. He does not get power, he does not get crit. So if you do not have a bunch of rear guards, Kheios can't really do anything at all. The huge power buff itself can be, pretty strong and pretty useful, but it is a little bit underwhelming because it's not super game ending, unless of course you have a huge board or something like that. So overall, Kheios' main issue has just been getting a full board of rear guards to actually make use of this skill, and he still kind of suffers from that. He does now have the ability to very easily cycle his main attacking target in the grade 3 Makani, thanks to the order that we got from the promo. Makani is going to be the main attacker for Kheios here. He says, we'll go over him in a little bit, but mainly what he does is that whenever Kheios attacks, you can restand Makani, which means you can very easily get 4 or 5 attacks with Makani. And he's also the main target for you to give power to, as obviously you'll be withstanding him. The downside with Makani is at the end of the turn that you use this skill to restand him, you have to put him to your soul, which means you can't use him again next turn. You have to continuously pull him out from soul or find another Makani. Thankfully, we got a promo as part of the tournament promo pack stuff, which lets you, among other things, pull out Makani from your soul. You can actually very easily recycle Makani as well as give him 10k. So he's going to be able to swing in first with 23, then swing in with 33 after Kheios' skill. Another issue with the way Kheios' skill procs is that it's on Kheios' attack, which means that you have to attack with your Makanis not as powerful first, then you can buff them up, because it is only after Kheios attacks a Vanguard specifically, so you can't attack a rear guard or something like that. You have to attack a Vanguard, then you can give the power. Then the other main piece that we got in set 8 is the grade 1 go off Makani here, which lets you do a lot of really good things for this deck. He has 3 huge skills. On place, you may soul charge, so you can choose whether or not to soul charge, which fills up your soul obviously. Then if you're on grade 3, you can put this card into soul, which gives you another card in soul, and then you can actually pull out a grade 3 Makani, which means you have very easy access to Makani thanks to these 2 cards. Finally, he has a 3rd skill that says if you have Kheios in your soul, this card counts as an individual card name even if you have multiple of it. So this is the key star for Kheios right now, and it's kind of something that it really needed. So right now, Kheios has a very easy way to pull out their main rear guard and get in 5 attacks with a lot of big power. And they can very easily, with the entire Dark States library, hit the 13 cards in Soul with different card names. However, Kheios still has an issue where he can't really fill out a full board. Right now, the only thing we can fill out is the Makane, and even then, we only have 2 cards that let us do that. So, in the future, what Kheios is going to need is just stuff that lets him fill out a full board. And if that's going to be rearguard dependent, that's going to be kind of difficult, or if it's order dependent, just because of the fact that you'll then have to find that card. So there is going to be presumably a grade 3 Kheios that's going to be released in set 11, and hopefully it'll fix this issue where Kheios can maybe call out rear guards from Soul somehow or something like that. But sorry, I didn't mean to spend so much time on the negatives or the issues that Kheios has. As you can tell already from the main game plan, what you want to do is just fill up your Soul until you have 13 or more cards with different card names in your Soul, and then bust out your Makanes to be able to swing in, and then swing in with Kheios to buff your entire board with 10k, and then restand your Makanes for 5 huge swings, ideally. And that's mainly the main playstyle when it comes to Kheios. For the ride deck, it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to be playing the grade 0 Kheios, as well as the grade 1 Kheios, followed by the grade 2 Kheios, and finally the grade 3 Kheios. I am not a huge fan of this ride line, to be honest, and we'll get into that in a little bit when we go over each individual card, but because of the way that this order works, and the deck is basically built around this entire order, we have to run the Kheios ride line. In the comm streets, Kheios here is the grade 1 Kheios, has a very simple skill that says when rolled upon by the grade 2 Kheios, you can look at, or rather reveal, the top 2 cards of your deck, put all normal units from among them into your Soul, and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. The reason I don't like this ride line is mainly because of the grade 1. You don't get to activate this skill until you go into your grade 2, and you can Soul Charge 2, which makes it better than most of the other ride lines, but in some cases you may Soul Charge only 1 or none, because you can only put normal units into your Soul. So if you hit a crit, or I should say just a trigger or an order, it goes to the bottom of your deck instead, which technically, you want your triggers to stay in deck, but you also have to hit a huge Soul requirement, so this guy sometimes isn't always helping. This is Quagmire of Solace Kheios, the grade 2, who has an alright skill that says when you ride the grade 3 over this card, you Soul Charge 1, and if you Soul Charge a trigger, you draw a card. If it was a normal unit, you can choose 1 card from your Soul and call it to rearguard circle. So the skill is actually pretty useful. You can pull out a Makane if you have it already in Soul, or just get some board presence, and if you Soul Charge a trigger, you kind of get the compensation of losing a trigger by getting an extra card in hand, so not too bad. I typically like to use a mat that matches the unit or the deck that I'm playing, but I just got the Persona 5 25 anniversary thing. I thought it was an actual playmat, but it seems like it's more like just like a mouse pad because it's very square and very small. But in any case, let's talk about the grade 3s. I actually only play 1 copy of the grade 3 Kheios in main deck here, which we'll get into why in a bit. We play 4 copies of the grade 3 Cool-Headed Executioner Makane, and then just 1 copy of the Haze Acrobat Miroslava, who I've kind of just added in. So the reason I only play 1 copy of the grade 3 Kheios is that Persona writing is still great. Being able to draw, give 10k to your front row, specifically to Kheios, is good. Of course, you run the issue of this being a dead card, in that it does not Soul Charge for you until you can ride over it on your grade, your next turn. So if you're on grade 3, this is a dead card in hand because it doesn't give you Soul immediately. Also, if you have multiple of Kheios in your Soul, it does not count towards your requirement of having multiple different grades, multiple different cards with different card names. Kheios himself already does a pseudo Persona Ride effect in that he gives 10k to all of your units, or all your rear guards, so you're not missing out entirely. You can play more of a Persona Ride if you like, especially considering I do have here the Miroslava, which I'm playing, but I also don't want to play too many grade 3s, so it's totally up to you whether or not you want more copies of the Persona ride. I feel like 3 might be too much, but 2 I think is decent. Next up, we've got the cool-headed executioner Makani here, who has 2 skills. The first skill we're rarely ever going to use. It does have some applications, but we usually don't have the means to pay for the cost. It says whenever this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you can counterblast 1, soul blast 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards with the same grade as the card that you soul blasted for this cost, and then you can retire it. So you have a little bit of removal. We really need our counterblast in order to use the order, so we're really not going to go into this effect as much, but it is there in case you need it, and it does activate if you play it from soul, for example. Then he has the glitter effect, which is only active if you have a Vanguard with Kheios. That if your Vanguard attacks, if your soul has 8 or more cards with different card names, you can stand this unit. And if you stand this unit, put it into the soul at the end of that turn. So this is what we use as our main rearguard to power up, as well as swing in, because he can restand, give us 5 attacks. But he doesn't really do too much else other than that. We have ways to power him up and make him more threatening, but the main focus of the deck is to try and get this guy out and just go blat blat in your opponent's face. The last grade 3 we have here is the Heat Haze Acrobats Slava. I said I just added this in the deck because this was originally a extra copy of Flaming Pony, but I figured I'd throw this in because she has the very useful skill of when this is placed on a rearguard circle from your hand during your main phase, you can counterblast 1. Choose a card with grade equal to or less than your Vanguard from your soul. Either put it into your hand if it's the same card name as your Vanguard, or call it to rearguard circle if you did not. And if you put something to your hand, she gets 5k. The reason Miroslava is really cool is obviously you can call out Makani, and that's really what this deck needs to do. And you can get away with playing more copies of the Persona ride because you can pull it out from your soul and sort of cycle it, and it doesn't necessarily become a dead card in soul, and that it doesn't add up to your soul count. But the main purpose that I have this for is to call out Makani. The counterblast cost, of course, is kind of heavy because, again, we want to focus on using all of our counterblasts on the order, which is counterblast 1 each time. So we don't really have a lot of cards, or we don't really want to run a lot of cards that use counterblasts. But if we need to do this, if we don't see the order and we'd rather have a body on board, we can go ahead and use this call out Makani. The grade 2s, for once, we actually don't have too many of them. We're going to be playing 1 copy of Steam Mage Asher Da, 1 copy of Silverthorn Rising Dragon, 1 copy of Selfish Engraver, 1 copy of Indicate Arrow Dragon, and finally 1 copy of Amazement Magician. So we aim to play as many one-offs as we can in this deck, because that'll obviously make it so that rather than have to worry about specific cards, if we just soul charge, if our whole deck is Highlander, or basically we only have 1 copy of each card, once we have 13 cards, we'll always hit the requirement for Chaos. Some people like to play Chaos, or at least they used to, with playing 2 elves of everything, but I think the pool in Dark States is wide enough at this point where you can play 1 elves of everything. And it kind of just comes down to that point into what is really useful for you, so you can really easily swap out all the cards. Just make sure you hit your 13 and can you pull out your Makanis, or at least have some sort of board. First off, we have Steam Mage Asher Da here, who says if you have 7 or more cards in your soul, this guy gets 5k shield, so he's a 10k shield. But more importantly, when it's retired from Guardian Circle, you can put this guy into your soul. Next up, the grade 2 that we have here is Silverthorn Rising Dragon. We only use it for the first skill that just says when it's placed, put a card from your hand into soul, draw a card. So this is similar to the Time Jarrett Dragon, who has the same effect. The only difference is that this is a grade 2, Time Jarrett's a grade 3. If you want the extra power, go ahead. But of course, we're playing Chaos. We give power to all of our rear guards, so we can get away with using a slightly weaker unit that can intercept, since we're going to make it 20. We play 1 copy of the Selfish Engraver. We really don't have access to countercharge readily available in Dark States aside from that weird Bruce order. Selfish Engraver is obviously very useful in any deck that has a very high soul count. She has the first skill that says whenever this unit attacks hits, you can soul charge 1, so she can add extra card into your soul. And then the final skill says, if you have 10 or more cards in your soul, at the end of the battle at this unit attack, you can put it into the soul and then counter charge 1. So if you get to pull this off, you not only get an extra unit in soul with a different card name, but you can also counter charge. Then we've got the indicate arrow dragon here. It says on place, reveal the top card of your deck. If there are no cards with that same card name in your soul, you soul charge 1. So basically the card that you revealed, you put into your soul. And the reason I play this is because I needed a way to fill up my soul during main phase, just so that I can get the most value out of Kheios' skill. I am playing stuff like the Amazement Magician here, but I would rather play the Indicate Arrow Dragon here because it's in main phase and it's a grade 2. Basically what this means is that since it's not in battle, I can attack with Kheios first, give all of my units or all my rear guards 10k, then they can go ahead and swing, rather than having to swing first with the Amazing Magician to, for example, maybe hit 13, then swing it with Kheios and give that unit or give those rear guards 10k, but then Amazing Magician already attacked, so she's gonna miss out on that. Since I'm playing pretty much one of everything, this just turns into on place, reveal, soul charge 1. Then we got ourselves Amazing Magician, who has the amazing skill that just says, when this unit attacks, you may soul charge 1. So you can choose whether or not you want to use this skill. Even though I said I don't want things that soul charge during battle phase, it still is very useful, especially early on in turns 2 or in turn 3. If I have a dry turn 3, I can use this to fill up my soul, and I can very easily use this, you know, turn 2, get some aggro, get some soul in. So she's a very nice card to have either way. For the grade 1s, we actually have a lot of them. First off, we have one copy of Flaming Pony, one copy of Jewel Core Dragon, one copy of Friend of the Netherworld Ling, actually 2 copies of Evil Eye of Prohibition Queen Lu, 1 copy of Direful Doll Simone, 4 copies of Go Off Makani, and then we have ourselves our PGs, of which we're playing 1 of each PG here. So we've got the sets 1 PG, the Trial Deck, Start Deck PG, the Chrono Jet PG, and then the set 6 PG. This you can very easily transform into the Elementia Sanctitude. I just didn't feel like swapping it out from whatever deck it is in right now. And finally, for the orders, we're going to be playing 4 copies of the One Who Governs Chaos, as the order that this whole deck is built around. And a grade 3 that I actually forgot to mention earlier is the Gratis Gradle, which is a grade 3 order, and it is the replacement for an extra copy of the Kheios, which we'll talk about in a second. So, Flaming Pony has a very useful skill that says you can bind this card from your soul charge 2. It's very useful in Kheios because you can get rid of it and add 2 cards into your soul. I was playing a lot of extra copies of this card, but it's kind of a dead card in hand, unfortunately, because you have no ways to put rear guards into your soul. If we can get some sort of more, you know, better ways to do that. I used to actually play multiple copies of this and stuff like the Derek, because it lets you put something into your soul. But until we get a more effective way to do that, we're only going to be playing 1 Flaming Pony. Jewel Core Dragon here is a new addition to the deck in replacement from one of the Flaming Ponies that I have. It has a skill when this unit boosts or attacks, it gets 5k until the end of the battle. Then at the end of that battle, you put it into the soul. So you can use this to aggress and then also add into your soul. And another card from the Drag Jeweled Trial deck as well, in Friend of the Netherworld Lin here. It says on place, look at 2 cards from the top of your deck, put 1 into your soul and put the other 1 in the bottom of your deck. So you can very easily, ideally keep triggers in your deck, but also just pick out something that's not on your soul, even though, again, most of the time, our entire deck is unique with the exception of the Queen Lu that we play an extra copy of, as well as the grade 3 Mekanis. Next up, we've got ourselves here Evil Eye of Prohibition Queen Lu. Is the only card in this deck that we actually play more than 1 copy of, aside from the grade 3 Mekani. The reason for that is that it makes the deck a lot more potent and gives the deck a little bit more of a kick and at a slightly better win condition than it currently has. Queen Lu has the skill that says you can put this unit into the soul, choose one of your rear guards, and it gets 2k into the end of that turn. Then, if your soul has 7 or more cards, your opponent cannot call grade 1 or greater cards from their hands or guard for the battle that the rear guard attacks this turn. So, you can very easily target Mekani with this, make him 15 or 25 or 35, Then, whenever he attacks twice that turn, your opponent cannot guard with anything that's not a grade 0 or the Elementia Sanctitude, because they can't call anything to Guardian Circle from their hand. So it just makes Makani way more threatening than he actually is, which is why we play 2 of these. We can also cycle her out with the Miroslava as well. Next up, we have Direful Doll Simone, who is another version of Guard Restrict that we have in the deck. This said, when this unit boosts, if your soul has 5 or more cards, you can counterblast 1 in until the end of that battle. When your opponent would call cards from their hand to guard, they have to call 2 or more. So this is another option that you can use. It's also reusable, it's just you have to pay the counterblast cost every turn. So if you have it, you can use it. If not, don't. But it's sort of a guard restrict that you can continuously have on board every turn to threaten your opponent with. And it's not as restrictive as Queen Lu either, since your opponent can just call 2 cards. It can call, you know, a PG and whatever other garbage card, but it is nice to have some sort of guard restrict. You can also use it very early on, and for example, use it against Kheios to make him pretty threatening. Next up, we've got one of the main stars of the deck. One of your main combo starters is the Go Off Makani, as I like to call him, but he's actually known as Go Ahead Makani. We're going to bring him down here because my camera thinks he's a little too shiny to focus on. He has 3 very, very good skills for Kheios. The first skill here says when his unit is placed on rearguard circle, you may soul charge 1. Doesn't have to be from hand, can be placed from whenever. And it also says specifically may soul charge 1. So if you're running low on deck or just do not want to soul charge, you don't have to. Then he has another skill that says if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can put this unit from field to soul. Choose 1 grade 3 card with Makani in its card name from your soul and call it to rearguard circle. This is an axe skill, so it's not on place. You can play this on an earlier turn, then use the skill to put this into soul to pull out Makani. And of course, you can pull out Makani with this, which is very good. So you can use this after a turn where you use your Makani to swing in and then play this to get Makani right back. The final skill here says Glitter. If you have a Vanguard with Kheios, when this unit is in your soul and you would count the number of different card names in your soul for a card's ability, this card and all copies of this card count as different card names. So if you have 4 copies of Go Off Makani in your soul, they each count as an individual card. So rather than counting them each as 1 card because they have the same card name, you count them as 4 different cards. This card just does everything that Kheios needs at the moment. Lets you get out your grade 3 Makani, lets you soul charge, and it counts as different card names in soul. We play 4 different perfect guards here, all with different card names. This one here is from the trial deck / start deck. You can change this for the Elementia Sanctitude. The Elementia Sanctitude is a blitz order that counts as a sentinel, and it has the skill that says if you use this to guard, if your Vanguard is grade 3 and your opponent's Vanguard is one with the triple drive ability, it will still count as a perfect guard, and you can not have to discard for its skill. Otherwise, you have to discard for its skill. The other cards here have the same sort of skill that say when you guard with them, you can choose a unit, and until the end of the battle that it's being attacked, it cannot be hit regardless of power. This trial deck one here has the skill that says no matter what, you have to discard a card to use the skill. It does have the added advantage that has 7k, where the other ones are 6k, but these have the skill that say if you have 2 or more cards in your hand, you have to discard. So if you only have 1 or no cards when you use this to guard, you will not have to discard, which makes these the preferred choice. Next, we've got the Gratis Gradle here, which is a Regalia piece. You can only have 1 Regalia piece in your deck, and you can only use 1 Regalia piece for the duration of the entire fight. This is a card that if you want, you can swap it out with the grade 3 Kheios for your Persona Ride, but it says if you have a Vanguard that is grade 3 that has the Persona Ride icon on it, and if you did not ride this turn, you Persona Ride, which you just get the ability to Persona Ride, you draw a card, your front row units get 10k for this turn, every unit that you have gets 10k, and also it counts as a Persona Ride. So if there's any skill that say if I Persona Rode, use, do X, Y, and Z, it counts as it. The reason I'm playing the gratis Gradle here is because it has a different card name than the grade 3 Kheios, which means I can Persona Ride without having to worry about having something with the same name multiple times in my deck. But of course, since it's in order, it does clash with the main key enabler card here in the one who governs Kheios. So it is kind of your call whether you want to play this or just another grade 3 Kheios. Last card we'll go over here is the one who governs Kheios. This is a promo that is very, very powerful for Kheios, and it is one that we're building the entire deck around because it has two very useful functions. This card says if you have a Vanguard with Kheios in its card name, play this with Counterblast 1. Because of this card, we don't like to use cards that counterblast because we want to prioritize this. It says after that, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and choose up to the same number of cards among them as the number of cards in your soul with Kheios in their different card names. This is why we play the Kheios Ride line, because it gives us as many cards with Kheios in the soul with different card names, which means of the top 5 that we look, we can choose as many of them as possible. Then we put those cards into the soul, which means this helps us get closer to 13 soul because it lets us basically put a bunch of cards into our soul. Finally, it has another skill that says if you have 8 or more cards in your soul with different card names, you can choose a card from your soul and call it to rearguard circle. This lets us search out our grade 3 Makani from our soul, pull him out. So it constantly lets us have access to the grade 3 Makani in order to have him be a giant beater that can swing in and re-stand. Also, as the final skill that says choose one of your rearguards with Makani in its card name and give it 10k power. It says any rearguard with Makani, so if for whatever reason we choose out a different rearguard from soul, let's say we already have Makani, we can still give Makani power. If we use this on turn 2 for some reason, we can give power to the grade 1 Makani and make him 18k on turn 2. This card is very important. It lets you pull out Makani and lets you fill out your soul. And basically, we want to at least play 2 or 3 of these throughout the course of the game in order to win. If we do not play any copies of this, we're going to be in a rough spot because we might not hit enough soul and we might not be able to pull out Makani. Unfortunately, that is the most consistent way that I've seen for Kheios to be able to hit 13 soul with different card names easily, and also have access to Makani, which are the main things that this deck wants to do. For the triggers, it's gonna look a little bit wild here, but we're going to play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different named critical triggers, one of them being the effect trigger. 1, 2, 3 different named draw triggers, one of them being the effect draw trigger. 1, 2, 3 different front triggers, one of them being the effect front trigger. 1, 2, 3, 4 different normal heals with different card names, and finally the world original Dark States Overtrigger, but it's basically the Dark States Overtrigger. Eventually, when in the English version of this game we get access to the character criticals, you can very easily swap out either the fronts or the draws to be able to play 8 crits, which will make this deck a lot more potent. But for now, my logic is that since triggers take up 16 cards in your deck, almost half, you want them to be all Highlander or unique, so that if they go to Soul, or more than likely when they go to Soul, they will all have different card names. The critical effect trigger, I often don't see myself being able to use this skill to put it on board, put it into Soul, and then be able to have another card in Soul, which is why we're not really playing a lot of extra copies of this. Same goes for the other triggers. We want them to be as unique as possible. The draw triggers make that a little bit difficult because they're only 5k shield, so you can very easily cut these out. Don't run the risk of decking out, but the fronts are nice to have, but of course being able to draw cards, especially early, to make sure you hit your soul requirement is nice, so it's up to you which one of these you'd like to cut. If you'd like, you can play 2 ofs of some of the crits and then cut either the draws or the fronts, up to you. We're playing normal heal triggers here. I have started to like the effect triggers, but unfortunately they're starting to fall out of favor because a lot of the top decks and the decks that you're more likely to see right now are not affected by these effect triggers, which is why we're going to stick to the normal triggers. In general, in a deck that soul charges a lot, I like using the normal vanilla triggers just so I have guaranteed as much shield value as possible. If it's a deck that I soul charge a lot, I don't often get to choose what heal triggers I get. I might not be in the perfect situation for that heal trigger, so I'd rather just have 15k flat. Finally, we have ourselves the Dark States over trigger here. We're using this as opposed to the Obario because Kheios himself does not do a lot. He does not pressure a lot. Him having plus 10k in crit throughout the entirety of the game makes him a lot more threatening in combination with our giant board. Obario is fine, as I always try to make an argument for it, because you can have Makanis, 2 of them that can swing in again with 100 million power, possibly with some sort of guard restrict if you have the Queen Lu or the Simone, but I think the 10k in crit is just way more value, especially in situations where you perhaps don't have double Makani, or you don't even have Makanis at all. It is just a little bit more useful to have this to put in the extra pressure. Next up, we'll go over a couple of little options here. First off, we have the Amazing Frost, who I have to do from down here, because if I go up any higher, they are just way too shiny for my camera. But the Amazing Frost is a card from set 5, where Kheios was released, that has a skill that says, on place, Soul Blast, draw, choose a card from your hand, put it into Soul. If you have 8 or more cards with different card names in your Soul, gets 5k. If you have 10 or more, he gets 10k. This, originally you would have used it if you had a lot of cards with similar names in your deck, but we don't really have that in this version of the deck because it's more of a Highlander, so this card is not really as useful. The 10k is actually okay, but if you want a 10k, you can actually just use the Rakagur, because Rakagur has the first skill that says once per turn when this unit attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, it gets 10k. If you have 4 or more cards with different grades in your Soul, which you more than likely will. Next up, also from set 5, is this teammate Barney here, who has a little bit of a typo, both on her choose words, where there's an extra C, but she has the skill that says on place from hand on rear guard circle. If you have 8 or more cards with different card names, you counterblast 1, choose a grade 1 or less from your Soul and call it. If you have 10 or more, you can choose a grade 4 or less from your Soul instead of grade 1. This you can use instead of the Miroslava if you value a grade 1. They both have the same activation cost where they have to be from hand and you counterblast 1. Choose a card from your Soul and you can call it out. Of course, you have to have more Soul in order to be able to use this, but if you don't have enough Soul to use this, you're in a tough spot already. So this also has the added benefit that it can pull out the grade 1 early on. Makani, if you have 8, and then use Makani to pull out the grade 3 Makani, if something like that is needed, also lets you soul charge, but it's up to you whether you value grade 1 or a grade 3. Miroslava can swing in by herself. Power doesn't always matter in this deck because you always give everything 10k, so there's going to be 18. Up to you. Then we have an order that was actually released in set 8, which is the Song of Extolment Can Be Heard. This is actually kind of interesting, but unfortunately, since you want to activate the one who governs Kheios every single turn, basically, you're not always going to be able to use this. But this card is actually not half bad. It has a skill that says if you have a Vanguard with Kheios in its card name, choose one of your Vanguards that gets 10k to the end of the turn, then you choose 3 normal units from your drop, put them into your Soul, and then you put this on the bottom of your deck. So you can recycle this card because it goes on the bottom of your deck. You can choose cards from your drop, put them into Soul. So if you play multiple Flaming Ponies, you draw into them, you can discard them for discard fodder, then use this to put this into Soul. Lets you, plus 3 on Soul from drop for free. And if it's Flaming Pony, you can use their skill. And also gives your Vanguard 10k for free, and can also be used on turn 1 if you'd like. So I think this card is kind of interesting, but again, it's either this or the one who governs Kheios. The one who governs Kheios a little bit more useful, lets you soul charge from deck. It also lets you pull out Makani, so it's just a little bit more useful, but I don't think this card is as bad as people make it out to be. I think it is very playable. It just clashes with the other order, which just gives you a little bit more value. If you play a variant, for example, that for some reason does not use or focus on the grade 3 Makani, then this might be a good card for you. Next up is Diverse Wildmaster Horatio. It has a very simple skill that says if you have 8 or more cards with different card names in your Soul, this guy gets 5k attack as well as the ability to boost, and also it gets 5k shield and can intercept from the back row. Unfortunately, it does not soul charge, but it does give you a nice little 15k attacker, 10k shield to have in in the deck if you'd like. Then we'll talk about a couple of the options that will be available from set 9 onward. There is the Dragon Tree Wrench Demon Shredder here, or Shredder, which it might be called, but this has the skill that if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it's an axe skill. You can Soul Blast 2, choose a grade 1 or less from your soul, and call it to rearguard circle in the same column as this unit. So you can use this to cycle out your grade 1 Mekanis, Soul Charge, and put that Mekani back into Soul. So it kind of just makes the card Soul Blast 1, and then pull out your grade 3 Mekani, and you can continuously do that since it is an axe skill. The Soul Blast 2 is kind of heavy. You don't always have extra soul in your soul, but one copy, it might not be that bad of a card to play. Next up is the Clean Sweep Dragon, who, if you'd like to play, you maybe need to play extra copies of the grade 3 Chaos in Soul, however you'd like. But the Clean Sweep Dragon says if your Persona rolled this turn, you can counterblast 1, choose a total of up to 3 of you and your opponent's rear guards, and they go into their respective soul, and this card gets 5k for each unit that you chose. So this has a lot of benefits. If you play a Flaming Pony, you can put this into soul. You can use it to remove some of your opponent's units. You can go +3 on your own field to put stuff into soul. However, you do have to Persona Ride and Counterblast, so just keep that in mind. But playing one copy of this does seem kind of nice. Persona Riding doesn't happen too often in this deck because you often end up Soul Charging the things that let you Persona Ride, but Clean Sweep is going to be a very good card in every Dark States deck, just about, so I thought it'd be worth mentioning. Next up is the Steam Skara Sargon, which I believe is going to be seeing a lot of play in Chronojet decks. But she has a skill that when she boosts, gives the boosted unit the ability that if it hits a Vanguard specifically, you can choose 2 units from your drop, put them into your soul. So this is very free if you can use this early on, put a lot of pressure on your opponent, and then just choose anything that you discarded, put it into soul, which can very easily get you to your soul requirement, which means that since you play a lot of cards that kind of let you selectively soul charge, or rather I shouldn't say selectively, that give you the option to soul charge or not, it allows you to maintain a lot of bigger, healthier deck and not have to soul charge as much, losing out triggers, so on and so forth. So this might be a nice little option to play as a one-off, and also gives you the option to be a little bit more aggressive early on. Then we've got ourselves the new effect trigger, the Direful Doll Churan here. Every nation is going to get this. It is a new effect trigger that does have 4k power, 10k shield, but basically if your opponent's Vanguard is higher than your Vanguard, this card gets 10k shield. So it's good for grade 4 decks, it's good if you're going second, but also good if you're playing against stuff like Chronojet that can go into grade 4, so it's going to give you a 20k shield. It's just an option to keep in mind if something like Chronojet gives you a lot of problem, or it's very, very prevalent where you play, you do have this to have a little bit of extra shield. For the Mulligan, it is kind of obvious what you want. You always want to try and pull out and have in hand the Cool-Headed Executioner. Even though we're playing around with a lot of cards that let us pull this out, if we don't see those cards, we're kind of in a rough spot. If we can just play this from hand, we'll be in a lot better position. Likewise, you can hold on to the grade 1 Mekani because you can soul charge early, you can use them to attack early, and then on grade 3 you can put them into soul to pull out the grade 3 Mekani since you will more than likely soul charge it by then. But of course, the main card you want to have is the one who governs Chaos, so you can be able to use this. You will more than likely need to use this card at least twice, so if you can add one of these from your Mulligan, that'll be great, and draw into another one afterwards, even better, maybe even with Chaos's skill. Optionally, you can hold on to your Persona Ride cards if you'd like. Obviously, the grade 3 has more value than the Grado, just because the Grado clashes with the one who governs Chaos. If you don't have the order, I guess you can hold on to this, but you always want to have the unit instead, just so you can activate more than one order that turn. Likewise, if you don't see the one who governs Chaos, you can hold on to Miroslava, for example, so you can use her to pull out your Mekani later on, but you probably don't need to have this as early unless you have other cards that let you soul charge, so make sure that on your first grade 3 turn you can go off with Mekani. such as the Amazing Magician. It's a nice card to have in your early hand because you can use it turn 2, soul charge, as well as get some early aggression on your opponent. And finally, if you end up after your post Mulligan with the Flaming Pony in hand, again, it's kind of a dead card unless you have the Rising Dragon, but you can just end up using it for discard fodder. Alright, so let's go ahead and do a quick test hand here. This is not looking horrible, but I think I will just about put everything back here. You could keep the PG here depending on the matchup and whether you're going first or second. Usually for these, I do a couple test hands and I alternate between first or second, but I usually just go first when I do this on video. You can try and keep the Rising Dragon. He's a card that I might end up swapping because right now there's not really a lot of value for him, but I think I will just put everything back. The Persona Ride is fine to keep, but if I have no way of hitting 15 Soul or any of my other cards, it's not really going to do anything for me. We're going to get a pretty mediocre hand, considering that I just had my cards, sorted out the way they were, but we'll see what we can do with that. Alright, let's go ahead and stand up our Vanguard here. We can get rid of the draw trigger. I did say that you can use the pony as discard fodder, but we'll keep it just for now in case we do see the Rising Dragon. We'll end our turn there. We'll take the 1 damage, unfortunately lose a one who governs Kheios, which would have been sure nice in hand. Actually, I didn't draw for turn, so this actually goes to hand, which is kind of sick. Then this goes to damage. There we go. Then we'll draw for this turn here. Not half bad. We have the one who governs Kheios and also Mikani here. We'll go ahead and discard the pony as I mentioned, and then go into the grade 2 Kheios here. We have the use skill of the grade 1 where we reveal 2 cards. We did end up seeing the Rising Dragon, but it is going to go to Soul, whereas this crit goes on the bottom of the deck because it is not a normal unit, unfortunately. As I mentioned, that is the main downside, is that you don't always get to Soul Charge as much as you'd like. We did go first, so we're going to go ahead and use Lemme here to look at 2 cards here. We're going to go ahead and put in Queen Lu and then put in the one who governs Kheios on the bottom of our deck, just because of the fact that we might be able to end up drawing that. Queen Lu is, not horrible to have. She can just go into Soul, give it an extra little bit of Soul here, but we're going to bank on our next turn to try and hit our Soul. You can either attack first, since we do play fronts here with the Vanguard, or just play it safe, attack with Lemme here. Then go ahead and attack with the Vanguard. Go ahead and see what we check here. It is actually going to be a Persona Ride, which is fine. For a turn, we don't really have a lot that we can guard with. In general, you kind of want to get mollywopped and just deal with it to get that counterblast. You can guard with the heal here if you'd like. However, I might end up having to use it for Chaos' skill in order to discard for Ride. So we're just going to go ahead and take 2 here. Fortunately, lose the go off Mikani, which would have been really nice. Draw and actually get yet another copy of Mikani, which may or may not be bad here. But let's go ahead and discard the heal trigger for Ride and then go into the grade 3 approaching Fangs Chaos here, using skill of the grade 2 to soul charge. Since it was a trigger, we are going to be able to draw 1 here. We're not going to be able to get a lot from that. We can do either skill in either order here, but I'll use Chaos' skill first to counterblast 1, discard 1. Look at the top 3 cards from our deck here, and we can add 1 to hand, call 1 to rear, and put 1 into soul here. We're going to go ahead and swap that, or actually, let's put both in soul, actually, because I do have 2 Mekanis. I could be a little bit more safe. We can not go off as much, keep this here, use the 2 Mekanis next turn. But it all just depends on the matchup here. If you want to be a little bit more aggressive, or you want to put your foot on the gas or take it off. But right now we've got ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards in our soul with different card names. Added benefit of playing basically Highlander here. So as mentioned, we have a couple of options. We can go double Mikani here, or we can save them. Let's go ahead and save them for now. Let's go ahead and use the skill of the one who governs chaos. We're going to do Counter Blast 1 yet again. We have ourselves 3 cards with chaos, or different named chaos in our soul, so we're going to look at the top 5 cards. We're not going to hit the best here. We're going to choose 2. I guess we'll choose the draw trigger as well and put the rest into our deck and shuffle. Put these into our soul. Since we have 8 or more cards with different card names, we can go ahead and use the skill. Probably would have been wise to play out the Makani, to be honest, just so they can actually get 10k. But if we go for a slightly softer turn here, what I can do is do a couple of things. I can get the Selfish Engraver here to get the counter charge. Then let's see how much we have in soul. We have ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cards in soul. It's only one card can get 10k, which is fine. We'll aim for a slightly bigger turn next turn here. So what we can do here is swing in with our Makani here, or swing in with Selfish Engraver, if depending on how much counterblast, or if there's rear guards, if you want to try and get the on hit to soul charge. But either way, let's say we swing in with her first. She doesn't hit, but she does go to soul, so we have 10 or more. Right, we do have 10 or more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10. Yep. So we get the counter charge, which is nice. Then we go ahead and swing with Kani. We cheated and we played him while activating the one who governs chaos, but he'll get 10k. So we're swinging for 23 here. Then we'll use Approaching Fangs Chaos here. Use the skills to withstand him. Use the skill of chaos to pick this guy. Give him plus 10k. And going for our drive check, get a nice PG, and as well as a jewel core that we can use for next turn. We're going to go ahead and swing in here with a nice, big, hefty 41k to our opponent. Then at the end of the turn, this is going to go to soul. We're going to pass on that. We don't have the best options here, regretfully, so we're probably just going to have to take one. Thankfully, it was a critical trigger, so we can have a little bit of a damage buff here. If we were having to guard, we can maybe discard the jewel core here. Maybe take yet another one here. And possibly end up having to guard with the chaos, which is unfortunate, but not much we can do about that. This turn we can go ahead and stand and draw. Actually, that is not half bad. Draw into the go off Makani, who will use this turn. Unfortunately, we use the Cradle. That would have been nice to have. Put that into soul. We should have about 12 cards, but we use the skill to put that into soul, pull out Makani. Then we have ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 cards exactly. Very nice. Then we'll go ahead and we can do a couple of things here. We can call out the other Makani, call out this Makani if you'd like for a booster, or just keep him in hand next turn. You can also use the skill of chaos to try and get something else in solo on board, however you would like to play this out. Unfortunately, had I known I was going to draw into another one of these, I would have played, kept the Persona Ride, discarded this, but whatever, that's the power of hindsight here. So however you want to play that. If we were to soul charge, it would actually end up being a front trigger, so in this case I'm glad I did not do that. But you can go ahead and attack with your double Makanis here, 13-13, then attack with your chaos for 13, restand both of your units. Then the skill of chaos will give everyone plus 10. As we know, we're going to check a front trigger, so we get another plus 10, and then we're going to check another Makani here. Then we have ourselves nice fat 33 and a nice big fat 41 yet again. Unfortunately, they both go to soul, and we don't really have a lot of defensive options for next turn, so we're probably going to get stepped on here, which is fine, but that's generally how the game wants to go. And that's sort of how chaos works. I do wish I did get a slightly better opening hand, but hopefully you get the general idea. So that does it for Kheios. Hope this video was helpful. I've liked Kheios for a good while and have wanted to see if I can make him work. I feel right now he's at the best that he's ever going to be. I should say that he's ever been. And he's only going to get better from here going further. Doesn't seem like there's a lot in set 9 that's going to change Kheios. Set 10 does not so far have a lot revealed, so we don't know if there's anything that's really useful. Off the top of my head from what's been revealed, doesn't seem like there's anything good for Kheios. But set 11 might be the set for Kheios, since we're getting another grade 3 Kheios as well as more Craycross Epic support. So we'll just have to see how that goes. I think Kheios is pretty fine. I think in general the deck can excel if you can manage to get a board early and be really aggressive early on. So playing more things that let you soul charge early and aggress early on, and then finishing off your opponent with the big numbers and 5 attacks. Because Kheios cannot last very long in the endgame, has no real source of draw power or anything like that, and again needs a relatively big board to be able to do anything. So you definitely want to play fast and loose with this guy. But in any case, till next time, take care of yourself, play Vanguard, and have yourself a damn good one.